when there is psychological safety, it's kind of hard to notice that there is psychological safety. But when there isn't, that's where you notice it. It's like air, right? So, like, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. We take air for granted. A couple of years ago, I had to go and work in New Mexico in a very high altitude area. I would just walk a little bit and I would be out of breath. And one thing that struck to me is that I always took air for granted. And I think psychological safety is something like that, where when you're working in a team where you are seeing that people are very agreeable with each other and they are not afraid to bring up difficult topics to talk about it and solve it. And when feedback is given to them, they take it in the right perspective and they are not afraid to bring up challenges. So that's an ideal place to be because the teams are going to be creating a lot more value and impact.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lyoshin podcast. We have a guest today, Toby Rao. He's an agile leader and community builder in the Washington, D.C. area, and also a conference speaker. Welcome, Toby.
Thank you, Whit. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me here on the show.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Let me just tell to the audience a few words about you and who you are. So you specialize in the strategic agile transformation for the organizations and change management and program management. And you're also the founder of TORA Solutions, which is a consultant agency that help organizations transition to agile and help them deliver business value for their customers and things like that. And
Absolutely.
you also worked across many different industries like e-commerce, banking, healthcare, and hospitality and government as well. You also co-founded a couple of meetups in Virginia, DC area. And you're also a speaker. You go around conferences and events and speak to people. So thank you for being here. And I invited you today to talk about a few topics that are very interesting, I think, especially in these days, which is building high performance teams and also NLP techniques, emotional intelligence, and psychological safety. Those are very important for the work we do every day. And I think they all contribute a lot to the building high performance teams. So welcome again. And before we jump into the topics, if you want to add a few words, if I missed anything or you want to highlight something, how you end up, where you end up, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Whit. I think you covered most of it. Most of the work that I've done has been in the federal government area, but I have also worked in other verticals. So how it turned out? So I used to be a technical project manager years ago, and then one I saw one morning that there was a group of people standing in one corner. And then I noticed them next day and the next day and the next day, every day. And I was wondering, what do they have a meeting early in the morning? And it was a very quick meeting. And I was a normal project manager. This was 2006, 2007. So I was very curious. And we didn't have laptops those days. We had, workstations. So I couldn't even go and like hide there. So I asked the person who looked like in charge. So I said, "Hey, what are you all doing here?" And he said, "Oh, we are practicing something called Scrum." So I became very curious, and I said, "Do you mind if I lurk around in one side and just listen to you?" And he said, "Sure, be my guest. You can come." So and I said, "Don't introduce me, nothing. I'll just be there." So then I noticed how they were talking about what is their plan for the day. If there are any potential things that will get in the way. And the way afterwards I came to know that the person is a scrum master, was helping to remove some of the obstacles. So I thought this was very interesting. And then I invited him to coffee and I tried to learn more from him. And so that's everything else is history after that. After that, I took a CSM course, and then I I found a job. It was difficult in those days to find agile jobs, so I did find one, and I joined and I became a Scrum Master. And then the journey continued. I spent many years as a Scrum Master, and I've played the role of product owner. And then you believe in like I, right, instead of a T instead of an I. So I try to expand my knowledge. So most of my career I've been an agile coach, but I've also worked as a release train engineer. So yeah, that's a little background story there.
Okay, got it. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's jump into the topics. And first question I have is, from your experience, what are some of the essential key factors or elements of the high performance team?
So the interesting thing with is that everybody wants a high performing team, but they want a ready-made high-performing team. But ready-made high-performing teams don't exist. You, as a leader, as a lead, have to invest in people and then build a high-performing team. So your question is, what are some of the key factors or common things that you find in high-performing teams? So I would say, just top of my head is going to be trust, right? If there is a high performing team, you will see that there is a very high trust between them, which means that they work together, they collaboratively solve problems, and they trust the knowledge and intentions of other people. The other high factor I would say is empowerment, right? If they're empowered to make decisions, if they're empowered to resolve issues, instead of having to go back up to management every time there is a problem, that helps. And then a common thing that you see is communication. They have effective communication, and communication is to solve problems and to give feedback to people. The other thing I would say is also like clear roles and responsibilities. When the roles and responsibilities are not clear, like accountability is not clear, sometimes it feels like, okay, who's going to do this, and it's not clear, and then work doesn't get done, right? And I would also like to add is that emotional intelligence, right? And emotional, and you talked about that in the beginning. So I think it's very important to be self-aware of how you are, how you're perceived, and then and then using that to build better relationships with people. So I would say those are the top things that I see in high performing teams.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was just sitting here and listening, and it comes back to me all the time that most of these things are soft skills that people have to acquire, have to build in themselves. We're
Hmm.
talking about technical teams, development teams, and like we're not talking about, oh, you should know this programming language or you should know this technology,
Exactly.
right? It's all human things between
Yes.
people, how we communicate, interact. Yeah, that's very interesting how it always comes back to soft skills and how people communicate. That's very funny.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what? So we know some of the things they should work on to be high performing team. What are the some challenges that there is a trend or pattern that you see in the teams?
The challenges that I see with teams, especially newly formed teams, right? You've heard of Tuckman's, so Tuckman's law, right? Of how teams can form. So when
Mm-hmm.
when people come together to work for the first time, a lot of people bring their own ideas, they bring their own egos, they bring their own reservations, and typically people are not very trusting of each other. So normally when a new group comes together, and there is a difference between a group and a team, by the way, which maybe I'll talk about if we have time. But when a new set of people come together, so they have to go through what is called normalization, right? So they go through forming, norming, storming, and then they get to performing. So which basically means that initially they are just individuals, and then they try to start working together as a group. So that they're doing that, and then a lot of times there might be some small clashes or conflicts of interest or a conflict of getting recognition sometimes, and sometimes they might feel that, hey, I know better than you, especially with technical people, or oh, that technology is old. I have so many years experience. But then over a period of time, you'll see that that kind of fades away, and they become a team where they are focused on solving problems together. So the difference between a group and a team is the group is made up of individuals who are very strong in their areas, and a team is where they have a common goal, they have a common purpose, and they fall back on the team. So everyone supports each person, and each person supports the team to grow, right? So that's the difference. So I would say,
Yeah.
that happens, and then um, a lot of times people have resistance to change. Like they are like, okay, this is
Hmm.
how I've always done it, and this is how I'm going to do it because this is all I know. I see that a lot of times that happens. And I said earlier, unclear roles, right? When people don't know what their role is, or when people are kind of stepping on other people's toes, knowingly or unknowingly. And sometimes it's also politics, right? When people play politics for individual or personal gain, that can be problem. And I would also say the communication, right? A lot of people I've seen withhold information. They feel that if they share information, their power is gone. But it's the converse which is true, which is if you share information and other people also develop the same expertise, it actually frees you to do other things, right? And then also I see that lack of feedback, right? Where if it is the culture where people don't ask for feedback or don't accept feedback openly. I've seen some groups in which when feedback is given to them, they feel that they are being attacked or they are being judged instead of taking it as, hey, they are looking at it from another perspective. Let me see, maybe let me open my thinking, right, my mindset. So if you have a siloed mindset, you're like, okay, I'm only going to be like this. But when people give you feedback and you act on the feedback and you see that it's for the benefit of the team, it's for the benefit of the program, and end of the day for the people who are going to be using the products that you're building, if that is your goal, then you take your individual out of it. So that's another thing that I've seen is where the lack of
Yeah.
feedback or lack of communication, and then also unrealistic expectations, right? If the vision of the program is not understood, if the goal of the program is not understood, or they don't even know what the OKRs are, and the work that they do, what is it contributing to? Sometimes they feel that the work that they're doing is meaningless. That can have problems as well. So, it's also the leaders who can set expectations and goals and help to guide the team. That's going to help as well. Yeah, so those are few things.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. I agree with everything that you just said. Again, comes down to all these soft skills that people need to gain,
Yeah.
and communication is being at the top of the list, and roles and responsibilities as well. People
Mhm.
just need to know what's going on, what the goals are, and how to work together with this. So, speaking of communication, let's talk about NLP techniques a little bit, and how these techniques can be employed, or how they can help teams, maybe between manager and teams, or maybe between team members. If you can speak a little bit what NLP techniques are,
Mhm.
and how to employ them.
Absolutely. So NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming. A lot of people confuse them with the technical term NLP. It's not. It is neuro linguistic programming. So, which basically means that we as human beings are actually wired up in a certain way, and our emotions, the way we process information within our heads, is actually done through neurological frameworks. And the linguistic part of it is that it, human brains, they translate normal language that we talk, and it translates that into, it goes into your brain, so it kind of decodes it, and then it processes it. And the programming part is where, as there has been a lot of studies done, since the 60s, that actually the way your brain processes the information can be programmed, can be learned.
Mm.
Old way of thinking is that you are who you are and you cannot be changed. NLP questions that and challenges that and says, no, you can learn new things. Of course, as you grow older, it can become a little more difficult to learn brand new things. Your brain is not as porous, but so neuro-linguistic program is that. So basically, it's a collection of ideas and tools and techniques that have been studied over a long period of time that helps you to become a better communicator and also helps you to create a better image of yourself. And it's actually linked very well with emotional intelligence as well. So you asked about some techniques. So, I mean, this is a very vast area, and I think it's still evolving. There's a lot of work that has been done, and it's still evolving. For
Mhm.
me, the things that stand out, if I think about it, is especially in our context of leadership or agile, I think is the NLP communication model. For example, there is something called VAK. Um, so V stands for visual, A stands for auditory, and stands for kinesthetic. I'm just giving an example. So if you
Mhm.
think about how people process information, how they take information that is being served to them, and how they as a person take that information and how their brain processes it. Um, so NLP says that there are three basic ways in which information gets processed in your mind. So there are some people who are very visual people, right? If you keep talking and talking and talking, they may not grasp much. So, but if they see a slide or if they see something that can be visualized, maybe a graphic, they understand better. Some people understand better when they draw pictures. I'm sure you've come across people like that.
Mm.
And then there are some people who, if you just show them a picture, is not enough for them. They need to see, they need to hear some sound. For example, you brought a new piece of furniture from IKEA, and it has a lot of pictures in it, but they may not understand by just looking at pictures, right? So they want to
Mhm.
get a sound. So for them, uh, you can go, if there is a YouTube video in which somebody is assembling it and shows, hey, this piece goes here, this piece goes there, and you tighten this, they understand better. And then there are some people who are kinesthetic, which means that they they internalize that information and process it within them, and then they can understand things better. So they are people with more feelings. So if you notice that most of the great presentations which are done, and you talked about conferences, it actually appeals to all of those three, right? So there are slides which has some basic information and pictures, and the person is talking and is giving statistics and giving facts. And then there is the kinesthetic part. So this is where the a good speaker will do some storytelling so that appeals to the people who are listening, because if people just listen to words, they may just evaporate. But if they listen to a story, they can internalize it better. So communication model is one. Then there is one thing called sensory equity. So basically, that model helps to understand, very, very subtle cues in behavior and language, and then helps you to understand better. So, and then there is this thing called reframing, which I find to be very powerful. So reframing is all about changing the meaning or the perspective of a situation that's happening, in which you are moving away from, for example, from feeling like a victim to somebody who can actually solve the problem, right? So it's a problem solving. So instead of thinking about oh, there is going to be a lot of traffic today, and I don't know how I'm going to get to the office. Oh my God, Washington, D.C. traffic is really bad. So that is where you're living in the problem zone. Reframing is where you take the problem, you face it, but then you come up with solutions to resolve those problems, right? So that's called reframing. And there are
Mhm.
some really advanced things such as meta programming, where you identify certain habitual patterns in your behavior, and then one by one you kind of try to solve them. That makes you a better communicator, and a better decision maker. I mean, these are some examples. There is also things like anchoring that you might have seen, where a person, for example, has stage fear, right, or is afraid to go and talk to a large number of people. And anchoring is a technique where you would talk to that person and say, okay, can you think of a person who is an amazing speaker, who speaks with a lot of confidence and kind of mesmerizes the audience? Do you know somebody like that? And most people would know somebody like that. It doesn't have to be somebody you know personally, and they'll come up with someone, and then basically, I don't want to go into a lot of details, but the NLP coach will help the person anchor themselves in that person and kind of evoke them into them, and that gives them the confidence. Say, hey, at that once you go to the stage, how about you take and kind of mirror the strong capabilities of the person that you feel is an amazing speaker, and this person now kind of invokes that person in them, and suddenly feels that power, that power that they were lacking, or the
Yeah.
confidence that they were lacking. So a lot of amazing things can happen with NLP. Yeah.
So it's not all also for like public speaking. It also could be for facilitating meetings, right? It
For
also could
anything.
be for, yeah, when people sitting in the refinement session and they get stuck or anything, they can just say, hey, like, hey, let's try this technique and let's try to focus on this and that. And as a maybe for Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, that would be really a skill to pick up and learn about it,
Hmm.
and try to employ it with their team and just see how it's done. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so if people want to learn more about this, do you have a recommendation of resources, or just like Google and YouTube?
um
What do?
yes, I do actually. So I did a course from India, and the my guru is one of the top NLP gurus in the world. His name is Vikram Dar. So he has different training offerings that he does. In addition to that, I would say the two books that I learned from. One
Mhm.
of them is called Coaching with NLP for Dummies, and it's available on Amazon.
Mhm.
And there is another book by the name of NLP: The New Technology of Achievement.
Mhm.
Those are two. And then there are some podcasts, there are some online communities and forums. I think there is some. I'm not participated in it, but I think there are some practice groups as well. And then there are certain trainings available as well, which are inexpensive if you just want to learn a little bit about it. But I do want to say that um, NLP is very important, but it's also important that it is done correctly, because you can mess up somebody's thought process or the way they. So it has to be done properly. So if you are very serious about wanting to learn about NLP, please connect with me, and I will help you, and I will connect you with the right resources. But definitely start with one of these two books, and that can help.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing this.
Of
This is
course.
very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is about emotional intelligence and how can it help in general in the team dynamics?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So emotional intelligence, and sometimes also called emotional quotient or EQ, There is something called IQ, which basically is your intelligence, the way you process
Mm-hmm.
information, the way you communicate, the way you look at statistics and numbers, and you're able to make decisions. So that's your intelligent quotient. And then your emotional quotient or EQ is the way that you behave, the way you work with other people, the way you communicate with other people. It has a lot of things in common with what you mentioned at least twice, which is soft skills. It has a lot to do with that, but it's more to do with you having a self awareness of, hey, who am I as a person? How do I react to certain things? What are some traits that I have? What are some of my strengths? What are some of my weaknesses? Especially when I'm behaving or working with not behaving when I'm working with a group of people. How am I perceived? So if a person has a good understanding of how effective they are, how they communicate, and they do some self analysis of themselves, or they take feedback from other people, and then they start improving themselves, they will see that their relationships improve, their communication improves, the group's ability to achieve results improves, and so basically, yes, emotional intelligence is about that, is being intelligent about your own emotions and how do you use that in an effective manner. Just knowing about yourself is not enough, but taking action to improve your communication and your ability to create impact with other people can be improved.
So, are there any techniques how to develop this? Again, just going back to like whether it's just reading books or taking course, or are there some other things that people can do to start uh, getting to know about this?
So, emotional intelligence, I mean, there's a lot of good literature on that, and even if you go to Google, you can find a lot of good information. Most of it comes from one single source. It is a person by the name, I forget his last name, Goldman. I think it's Goldman. Yeah. So he is the person who's actually brought this whole concept to reality. So there's a lot of books and simple things that you can start with, but on a simple, very very simple way, I would say start with self awareness, right? So um, think about how are you perceived by others. Are you effective in your communication? Do people understand the way you speak and the way you present ideas? And also, if you know somebody who you can trust, uh, especially in a workplace, having a partnership with that person and asking them for true reflection and feedback can help, and then improving those things. So, for example, if I am a person um, who has a short fuse, right? If I'm a person who gets upset over everything, and I don't realize that till somebody either tells me or I start seeing that people don't want to network with me, or when I go to the cafeteria to get lunch, nobody wants to sit with me. Then I might notice that I might feel that, is there something wrong with me, or like why are people behaving a certain way, right? And then from the self questioning comes self awareness, and you can dig deeper to try to understand what might be happening, or people can give you feedback. So let's say it is the short temper, right? Or like if I'm a person who gets upset over small things, then I could take help. I could take coaching help from someone, or I could read books about it, or I could go to see and talk to other people who are very effective and say, hey, it looks like I'm having challenges with this particular area. What can I do to help? So there's a lot of good material to help you help you with that. So with self-awareness, once you understand that you get upset, then the next thing you'll do is to try to understand the trigger. Like, what is your trigger? What makes you upset? So let's say if what makes you upset, I'm just giving an example, is when people come up with lame excuses for not finishing their work, for example. Then you have to train yourself to be patient and ask the right questions instead of snapping into becoming upset. You ask them questions which are going to help that person better. So let's say there is a person, this is the third daily stand up in which this person has still not finished the subtask and says, oh, I'm dependent on John, and John has not finished the work. So if your trigger is that, then you train yourself to ask the right questions or take a deep breath. Sometimes even meditation and other things help. But in this particular scenario, instead of being upset with that person, you're going to say, okay, no problem. So, what did you talk to John? Do you know when he's going to be done with the work? Are there other things that you can work on? Because this is an important deliverable that is coming up, etc., etc. So having open communications is better than just getting upset, because getting upset doesn't solve anything, right? So emotional intelligence is extremely important, and you can learn through self-awareness first.
Yeah, I'm just wondering here that if the person realizes it, then that's fine. They can work on it and find help or whatever. What if person doesn't realize it? What if others see that this person behaves in a certain way in certain situations and it never changes? How do you give feedback to these people? Like, it has to be somehow carefully done, because you don't really want to, upset a person or anything like that.
I know. So that becomes extremely difficult with, especially in a corporate setting, where we are trying to have psychological safety for people, and a lot of people who are not given feedback in the right way, there is a tendency for them to rebel and revolt instead of understanding. So it's a mindset thing. So I think it would depend on your organization and your team. But oftentimes, what I have done is, instead of singling out one person in a situation like this, so if I'm coaching or mentoring them, in a group session, I might bring up a topic that, or through storytelling, talk about, hey, I knew this particular team where such and such thing happened, and there was one particular person who was very used to get upset over everything, etc., etc. And so you subtly say that. But then if it is a real problem where this, because of one person, the whole team or the group is impacted and there's having a lot of problem, um, having a safe conversation with them, like a coaching conversation with them, a one-on-one conversation over a period of time. Once you develop trust with that person, you make them comfortable enough to be able to share such information with them, can help. There is no perfect answer, unfortunately, because of every organization, every team is different, and every individual is different. So just because it works in one organization with a group doesn't mean it's going to work somewhere else. But it is important to kind of make them aware, or even do a course, like do like a lunch and learn on emotional intelligence, and see if they pick it up from there, because then they might be a little more open to listening to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking here, like having those lunch and learns once in a while and just
Mhm.
bring up this topic and say like, hey, let's talk about this area
Yeah,
today. and
exactly.
and and it's kind of like unintentionally bringing it up. and
Yeah.
and I know in my organization right now, well, it was a couple months ago, but they opened a few sessions for psychological safety training, and anybody could go and sign up and take a course and just see what it is about and how to be better in the
Mm.
organization and things like that. So those type things I think are great, and they're really not like singling out people, like you said, or
Exactly.
not giving person straight feedback to their face and saying like you're doing something wrong. So it's like, you need to be a little bit more nicer than that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
unless
that's great.
it's a real problem, like I've seen situations where there is a one person who's like really disrupting the work of everybody, then that's an HR thing, you know. But if it is like
Yeah.
you are trying to develop someone, then you know you have to act as a partner and you have to act as a coach to help and develop that person.
Yeah. So, how are organizations in general, or maybe just the team's coach or Scrum Master, can start developing the safe environment for their team, or for their teams in general, for psychological safety, for awareness about emotional intelligence and things like that?
That's another great question. So psychological safety, or feeling that feeling of trust, again, it's something that comes over time. As I mentioned earlier, when it's a brand new team, there could be a little bit of friction. There could be a little air between people where people are not very comfortable with each other. So psychological safety comes over a period of time, and I feel that when so it's interesting. So when there is psychological safety, it's kind of hard to notice that there is psychological safety. But when there isn't, that's where you notice it. You know, it's like air, right? So, like I live in the Washington D.C. area. We take air for granted. Couple of years ago, I had to go and work in New Mexico in a very high altitude area, and then I found it difficult. I would just walk a little bit and I would be out of breath. And I was also wearing a mask. And one thing that struck to me is that I always took air for granted. And I think psychological safety is something like that, where when you're working in a team where you are seeing that people are very agreeable with each other and they are not afraid to bring up difficult topics to talk about it and solve it, when feedback is given to them, they take it in the right perspective, and they are not afraid to bring up challenges. So that's an ideal place to be, because the teams are going to be creating a lot more value and impact. Their effectiveness and their efficiency is going to be better, and that's because of that psychological safety. They feel comfortable in that. And you might have noticed, like, for example, in our agile practices or scrum practices, in our retrospectives, we typically just ask or invite just the team members there. We say, hey, no managers, no senior people, and the reason for that is psychological safety. And it's not like they are talking bad about their managers, they're talking bad about their leaders, but they are discussing things and problems with the people they work with day in and day out. So, who are the people who understand the problem the most? Is going to be the people who are facing the problems. So, let's say, for example, there is a problem with licenses for certain tools that they're using. So, if that is something that is brought up in the retrospective, then the Scrum Master or the product owner, they can bring up the topic and say, "Hey, what can we do to solve this problem?" Right? So you're bringing, not only are you bringing up a problem, together you're trying to solve the problem. And so if there is psychological safety, people will bring up that problem and say, hey, here's the problem we're having, and other people will give ideas without thinking that they're being judged. So in teams where psychological safety is missing, people don't speak up and engage because they feel, I don't know if my idea is good enough, and I don't know if somebody's going to laugh at my idea. Oh, the technical lead, I know he's going to laugh at my idea. But when there is psychological safety, they're like, okay, let me throw my idea. The worst thing they're going to do is not take it, and that's fine. So as a leader, as a scrum master, as a coach, you should encourage as many ideas as possible. So, a couple of things that you can do is, like, if you feel that your particular team doesn't have a lot of psychological safety to begin with, you can use anonymous tools, right? There are so many anonymous tools. that you can do for getting the inputs from people. And after the inputs have come in, so there can be like an incognito mode that you can use in Miro, in Mural, in a lot of these tools have that. So use that first, so people will come up with the problems they feel, because it's anonymous. They feel they can say what they feel. So that's the first step. So when you do that over a period of time, maybe you don't need to go into that mode anymore, right? The incognito mode, because people now are more comfortable, because people know that they're bringing up problems to solve the problem, not to kind of throw somebody under the bus. I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, it does. Great. And you also mentioned a couple of techniques, which was my next question, which is great. That's how basically you start. And I just wanted to also mention that I was in a situation a couple of times when when I was asked to work with a new team. And and by the way, I see this mistake sometimes in people, and that's why I'm bringing that up. So my approach is usually for the first month or two, I do not make so many changes to the team. I just
Mm,
observe and learn from them and take it easy and just carefully ask questions like why you do this way, or what is this? Can you explain to me why
mm,
you doing something or whatever? And just to get to know them. And it also may let me adjust to this team for a little bit and gain trust with them, and then gain trust with me. And then after a month or two, usually I do it for a few sprints basically. And then I will start bringing up some things and say like, hey guys, let's try this, let's try that. What do you think about this? What's your idea in this area? And they start to opening up over time. But so many times I see people, new managers, they come in and on day one, they want to make all these new changes. And they say like, oh, this is all wrong. We need to go this direction. I'm like, come on, you can't do this. Like, this is exactly how not to do it. So, and I just wonder, like, where these people coming from? How they got this idea? Is it because they're managers? Is it because they're like just never worked with people? Like, where is this coming from?
so
And you know,
yeah, I think where it's coming from is that if they've been in part of organizations where the culture is crack the whip, and people just do what they're being told. But I think such environments don't really succeed in a long period of time where people are just told what to do, right? We have come to more modern ways of working where um, everybody has strong intrinsic values. They have self-respect, and everybody has ideas. It's not The ideas don't just come from bosses, right? um, so if you've heard of something called meritocracy, right? So I remember way back
mm-hmm,
when my father was working back home, in an industry. The promotions were always based on seniority. So if you were senior, then you get promoted. I don't see that anymore, right? That has faded away. If you bring
mm-hmm,
the best idea, if you can solve the problem, if you can deliver better, especially in the US, if you can deliver better, then you are the person who will get more responsibilities. And when you get more responsibilities, and accountabilities, and you are able to deliver, you will grow faster, right? So I think the answer to your question, where do these people come from? I think a lot of the people have been individual contributors, honestly. It's I don't think they are wrong, and I don't want to judge them, but a lot of them have been individual contributors. They don't know how to contribute and deliver results through others. Like, if you tell me to code all day, I can sit here and code all day, right? But then
mm-hmm.
if I have to guide six other people and help them to produce better solutions, I have to speak their language. I have to respect them. I have to develop certain skills which I didn't have before. I think that's what the problem happens is people they only bring part of their skills, and their organization has not helped them to grow to the next level. And I think that's where you and
Yeah.
I come in. We should not like judge them, but help them and widen their horizon and teach them how to do these things better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of individual contributors can do that, or people who are have done it for a long time, and they kind of expect that everybody around them already know this, and it's like almost common knowledge, but it's not. It's very industry specific. So, and yeah, I think all this, what we've talked about, trainings and working on your own soft skills and like reading books and getting to know what is emotional intelligence, what is psychological safety. So you can start practice it with your teams, and it will help everybody essentially. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now also, I mean, we almost probably came out of this remote thingy after the pandemic, but it's still there. Many companies work remote, and they are in fact distributed all over the planet these days. Um, how how is it affecting psychological safety on remote teams?
That's a interesting question, but I think it's also touches on reality, right? I mean, even you're right. I mean, we did come out of the kind of phase where everybody was locked in. Many organizations have either become hybrid or they're going 3 to 4 days a week. But also there are a lot of people who are working remotely, and I feel that um, those 3 years have taught us a lot, right? A lot of organizations that thought that everybody has to be together in a room or in the same building to produce results is not true anymore. People were able to produce equally or more results just being remote. Um, so let's kind of compare them side by side, right? So human beings are social animals. We The way we are raised, the way we are social. We like to be with people. We like to be in groups and interact. So what COVID did was kind of threw us in little jails of our own homes, Uh, and so if I'm in an office, right? So let's say of course, I'm working the whole day from, let's say, 9 to 5. I might have a meeting, and in between the meeting, I might go to the cafeteria to get coffee. I might meet a couple of coworkers, meet a couple of other people from another department. I might just say hello and get my coffee and water and then go to the next meeting. Most of the meetings will start with, because we're still waiting for people to come, we talk about the weather, we talk about sports, we talk about dogs, we talk about a bunch of things before getting to the meat of the business. And then when we go back to our desk, somebody has a question, they feel comfortable enough to come and ask you the question. Or if you need something, you can go to your boss and ask those questions. So there was a lot of social interaction that was happening. And then when you're having lunch, you're going to meet with people. Or on Fridays, you would go out for lunches or happy hours with coworkers. When everybody was working from home, that was gone. And unfortunately, now with hybrid also, we are back to back to back to back meetings, right? I mean, there's not even 5 minutes to go to the bathroom sometimes. And you are very focused on each meeting at a time, like especially for me, that's how it is. And then even for people who are individual contributors, they feel that it's a lot more meetings, right? And what's happening in this meeting is that you are focused on that topic, and it can create some burnout, right? People can get burnt out because of that. And most of the time we're just focused on that. So I would say that, like, a couple of things that I've seen that work is, um, like, and honestly, last 2 3 years I've worked with some people who I've only worked with remotely. I've never seen them in my life. But then, having that little chit chat in the beginning, or sometimes just having a more personal one-on-one conversation. Say, hey, um, John, I would like to know you better. In one of the meetings, you said that you have a motorcycle. Oh, I have a motorcycle too. What kind of bike do you have? And he said, oh, I have a Harley. Oh, I have a Suzuki. And then you talk a little bit about it, right? Now you have a more human connection with John, right? Because you
Yeah.
know that he likes motorcycles, you like motorcycles, and then maybe somebody talks about horses, and somebody else knows about horses, and they talk about horses. So I think making that personal connection, and actually it takes a little more effort, And I know during COVID there were a lot more Zoom happy hours. I think those are gone away. But even then, doing some team building activities, and if you're using Scrum, if you have, for example, the INP sprint, right? Like if you have an innovation sprint, um, putting some sort of a hackathon or doing something creative can help. I was once part of one team where every Friday, the daily stand up, they would have a theme. So one time they had a Hawaiian theme, and everybody had to wear Hawaiian shirts for the stand up. Another time they had like everybody has to wear like fancy sunglasses, and they all wore sunglasses. Something fun, right? It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
expensive or spend money, but sometimes those create kind of the mood and the vibes that is needed as well. Yeah. So those
Yeah.
are some ideas you can use.
Yeah, that's great. This also helps people to have like a little icebreaker, right? Even
Exactly.
though they worked with each other for a long time, I sometimes find that I work with this person for like 5 years and I have no idea where they live, either they married or not,
Yeah.
uh, they have children or not, they have pets or not, or whatever. And then when it casually comes up in the conversation, I'm like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, that's interesting. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of surprising sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot of good topics here. Thank you very much. That was great. And yeah, I'll try to find references to things you mentioned and put them in the description. And I'll add your contact information for people who would like to connect and get more, pick up your brain for something or whatever. So
Absolutely.
they will be able to do that. So yeah, thank you very much for connecting. And I hope we'll talk in the future again. You have wealth of knowledge here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vit. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.